production process. From the previous slide, we have defined agriculture as an art. Now, you can ask yourself a question: what does the term art mean? Now, the term art essentially means application of human creative skills and imagination. And in general life, art is commonly known in drawings. When somebody draws a very good thing, we call that one art. But art is not only used in drawings, it's used in beauty palaces or palace. Art is used in formation of various things like buildings, yeah? Constructing various structures. Now, in agriculture, we apply these skills, these human skills that are learned and imagined in various activities. One of the activities is tilling of land, either manually. You have to know how to till properly so that you can be able to, if you're doing the first tilling of your land, you can be able to cover the weeds properly. You can be able to turn the land properly so that the weeds can decompose. If you're using a tractor, for example, you have to have that skill of knowing how to first drive the tractor, number two, lowering the plow, and then plowing the land in an orderly sequence to ensure that your field is clean by the end of the tilling process. Construction of farm structures, for example, structures like the pigsty where pigs stay, a dairy unit, a poultry unit. Constructing all these structures and cages requires a skill. You have to imagine, you have to know what to place where and how to make it efficient for the process of production. Measuring distances, for example, you need to know the spacing, for example, between different crops, or in different crops like maize, for example, 75 by 25 for short varieties. Then you measure that distance and leave that space between and within the rows. Between means from one row to another, and within the rows means from one crop to another. You measuring those distances is a skill. Maybe you want to measure the size of your piece of land. You want to measure the place where you will construct a given structure. Maybe it's a big pigsty. The size and the dimensions, it requires skills. You have to learn, you have to imagine, you have to know how that thing should be. Machine operation, for example, you are operating a planter. You want to measure the seeds, you want to space the seeds very well. You have to have the skill of which type of structure do I put that will give a given kind of spacing, and how do I attach this plant, and how do I use it using this machine. You want to use a tractor to till your land, you have to know how to do all those processes. You want to use a combined harvester, how do you use it? You want to use a sprinkler in your piece, how do you attach it and use it in your farm? How do you use a water pump? You just have to have that skill of operating these different machines in your farm. Harvesting crops, for example, you have to know, for example, there's a difference in harvesting maize from that process of harvesting wheat, which is different from harvesting bananas, which is quite different from harvesting potatoes, because these are tubers from the soil. So you have to know, so that you don't leave a lot of produce in the farm, or you don't destroy these tubers, which may reduce their quality, for example. So you have to have that skill, which tools to use, how to do it. Feeding and handling animals, for example, you need to know how to compute the rations. You have to know which this animal requires a given quantity of feed depending on the size. You have to know where to place the feeds and how to do that, and many other things when you're handling. For example, you need to know how to use to restrain the animal, for example, when you're handling it, where to put the rope, For example, you're using a structure called a halter where that you put in the nose. How do you put it, and how should you lead that animal? uh, so you need to learn all those things. Marketing of agricultural produce, you need to have a skill in marketing. You need to know how to advertise. You need to know how to get the buyers. For example, using maybe brokers or whichever person you're using. You need to know how to get them. You need to know how to access the market easily. That's a skill. As science, a science is something that requires you to carry out experiments and come out with conclusions and bring knowledge out of it. So agriculture actually is applied biology. It requires you to carry out an experiment, come out with knowledge from it. So it entails a couple of things. One of them is crop pathology, that involves the study of crop diseases. Various diseases that affect different crops, the fungal diseases, viral diseases, bacterial diseases, and how do these affect these crops, and how can they be controlled. Entomology, which is the scientific study of insects and their control, the various insects that affect crops. We have the aphids, for example, and how do you control these insects when they attack your crops, and what are their negative effects. Genetics, which is the study of inheritance and variation. This one you get it a lot in biology, and it is applied a lot in plant and animal breeding to improve the quality of the animals, so that their productivity can go high. So that this maybe you grow crops in a small area, but they can feed a lot of people. And you've seen this. If you look at the black nightshade, which you commonly call managu, in the past we have been having the small leaved varieties. Currently we are having the big leaved variety that have been improved through genetics. The genes of production are extracted and put in this plant, maybe to enhance productivity, maybe to enhance disease resistance, and all that. And that one also has been applied to animals. At some point, this has led to a debate of genetically modified organisms, which are said to be which are said not to be very healthy for consumption. All that is genetics. Ecology, the study of interrelationships of living organisms and their surrounding. How do living organisms relate amongst one another? How do living organisms relate with the environment, with the air, with the water, with the soil? How do they relate? How do they depend? Do they feed on one another? How do they do that? So that's ecology. Agriculture involves agricultural engineering, where we apply scientific principles to design, construct, and maintain agricultural tools and equipment, because we use agricultural tools, various agricultural tools and machines. How are they designed? That's why we do in Form 1 we do agricultural tools and equipment. Then we'll do farm structures in Form 3. We'll do farm machinery in Form 4. So how are these machines designed, and how do they work? How do you maintain them? How is a djembe made? How do you maintain a djembe, for example? When the hand is broken, you replace broken one. So we do it in agricultural engineering. So if you want to be an engineer still, you can. Agriculture is a very wide path for you. You have soil science, that involves the study of the soil. Study of the soil. It's also called soil pedology. What are the soil constituents? We'll talk about them. What are the soil books? For example, soil contains living organisms. The soil contains water. The soil contains air. Soil contains organic matter. So what are the importance of these things, the soil, and how do they contribute to plant growth and the survival of other organisms, because organisms interdepend on one another from ecology. So that is the scientific aspect of agriculture.